Welcome again to the old principal. 我就是老校长, and we have come to an English instructional program. In fact, this will be lesson number 310, Reverse Culture Shock. Okay, have you ever heard of culture shock? Well, if you have only lived in your own country and you have never gone to another country, you probably don't know anything about culture shock. Culture shock is 文化带来的冲击. Okay, when you go to a new place, it's like, oh, we don't do that. We don't act that way. We don't say those things. And it starts to get onto your mind, and it's very frustrating at times. Now, this is 文化带来的冲击. Now, in this lesson, this is reverse, 相反的. Reverse? Well, when I went to Taiwan, China, I had culture shock. Now, reverse culture shock is that I have lived in China, I feel comfortable with China, and I go back to America. Guess what? When I went back to America, I had reverse culture shock. I saw the American culture, 美国的文化, and it definitely did bring me some moments of consideration, 是文化冲击, but reverse, because it was my own country. This is where I was born. And yet, I had been in China, and now I go back home. And I will tell you in today's lessons why, some of the reasons, not all of them, of course, that I had this reverse culture shock. But now, before we begin, we need to ask Mrs. Ash to read the story. After the story, I'll be right back and we will look at it sentence by sentence.
Story 310, Reverse Culture Shock. In 1982, we had already lived overseas in Taiwan for 12 years. Our boys were now 9 and 13 years old. It was time for them to learn about their homeland. They understood a child's level of Chinese and felt comfortable among the Chinese people. Now they needed to learn how to cope with life back in America. For the first year back home, I finished up a MA degree in education. During the 12 years we were overseas, America had entered into the computer age. In fact, all teachers were expected to be computer literate. The difference between our son John and myself regarding computers was interesting. First of all, he seemed more interested in experimenting, whereas I was afraid that I might punch the wrong buttons. Secondly, I'd rather find someone to explain how to solve the computer problem rather than ferreting out a solution from a book. And probably the biggest difference was his patience. I was often frustrated when things didn't go as I had expected. John just patiently worked through his computer difficulties. Our restaurant eating changed dramatically. Instead of eating lots of Chinese food, we now switched to eating Mexican food. Of course, there are lots of Chinese restaurants in every big town, but we hardly ever went to them. Maybe we had experienced burnout on the Chinese food. Another source of reverse culture shock was the inconvenience, inaccessibility, and expense of America. In Taiwan, if I wanted to build something, all I had to do was to purchase the parts and then build it. But in America, it seemed that almost everything is already made or assembled. But after a few weeks, I discovered that the high cost of labor had forced many people to espouse the do-it-yourself ideology. Oh yes, car repair was also a big problem. Not only was it expensive, but honest mechanics seemed hard to locate.
Welcome back. By 1982, we had already lived overseas in Taiwan for 12 years. 已经在国外，就是在台湾住了12年。Okay, 12 years. Our boys were now 19 and 13 years old. 9 and 13, 19. 9, 9岁跟13岁. So they're 4 years apart. One is 9, one is 13. Going on. It was time for them to go back and learn about their own homeland. It was time for us to go back. At that time, I thought it would be 永久回国. So we were going to go back home, and they needed to learn about their own homeland, 自己的本国. They needed to learn. Of course, they could speak English, but that's all. They didn't know anything about American culture. Going on. They understood a child's level of Chinese. Okay. 小孩子的水平的中文啊, they could speak 很流利, better than I could. So they were really, really good. But it was a child's level. 小孩子的水平. Okay. And they felt comfortable among the Chinese people. 在中国人的地方感到很舒服. All their friends were Chinese. I guess that makes sense. You feel comfortable where your friends are. If they're Chinese, then hey. Nowadays, all of my friends, well, I wouldn't say all, but a lot of my friends are Chinese. Going on. And now they needed to learn how to, cope with life back in America. 美国的生活, 美国的文化, living in America, facing the American culture. They needed to know how to cope with this. Cope, 应付 this life and culture and these things going on. For the first year back home, I finished my master's degree, MA degree in education. 第一年我读完了这个教育硕士学位. I finished that up in 1982, 83. Okay, so I went back there, and then after I finished up the master's degree, I took on a job. I started working, going on. During the 12 years we were overseas, America had entered the 电脑时代. 电脑时代. And of course, I didn't know anything about it. So we bought our first computer. Our first computer. If any of you know anything about computers a long time ago, our first computer was a Commodore 64. My, Commodore 64. That's a long, long time ago. Today, a Commodore 64 is only seen in a museum. 只不过是放在博物馆, a museum. Good place for Commodore 64. Today, computers are much stronger, much bigger. Going on. In fact, all teachers were expected to be computer literate. What does it mean to be computer literate? Computer literate means 他们必须懂电脑. Nowadays, all teachers have to be computer literate. You can't do anything without a computer. Even though I am the old principal, 我是老校长, but I have had to continue to study and study computers. Back there, I knew nothing. All teachers had to be computer literate, and I didn't know anything going on. The difference between our son John and myself regarding computers was interesting. See, we got a computer, and the difference between us, 这个分别对电脑的看法就不同. You see, my son, he had a certain way of looking at a computer, and so did I. So, 关于这个电脑，我们的看法、做法都不同. Going on. First of all, he seemed me more interested in experimenting. 他很喜欢做实验. Try this, try that, something new. He would punch the buttons, just like this. And whereas fanar, in this case, whereas could be translated fanar, I was afraid that I might punch the wrong buttons. 我会按错钮, how do you say a button? 钮, okay. 按钮, okay, not 鸟, no, 钮, 按错钮. So I was afraid to do this, but he wasn't afraid. He just punched the buttons. If it didn't work, he'd turn off the computer and start again. But for me, I would say, 非常小心, 胆子小. Maybe that's it. I wasn't very brave to do things like that. Going on. Secondly, I'd rather find someone to explain how to solve the computer problem rather than ferreting out the solution from a book. 我宁愿 find somebody to explain how to solve a computer problem. Okay, he explained, well, this is 怎么样解决这个电脑的问题. 而不愿意 Okay, 而不愿意 what? Ferreting out a solution from a book. 从一本书这个找出来一个解决的方法. Now this is ferreting. Ferreting, a very long word. It means to 寻找某一个东西, to ferret out. Actually, ferret is an animal. So if you are interested, maybe you could go on the internet and find out what a ferret is. It's a little tiny animal. Okay, so, but to ferret out something means to find something in a book. In this case, it's a book. My son, I'd rather 我宁愿找人而不愿意看书. Okay, rather, okay, than, 宁愿而不愿意等等. Okay, good English way of explaining things. Going on. And probably the biggest difference, 最大的分别 was his patience. His patience, 他的耐心不得了. Even today, even today, he lives and works in the world of computers. 他的工作都是电脑方面的工作，电脑程序这个 wow patience 哎呀呀呀呀 but me going on I was often frustrated when things didn't go as I expected 我期待 the computer was supposed to do something and then it didn't do it and I was frustrated 我紧张我气啊等得不耐烦啊I just was not patient I was not interested I was frustrated and John just this is my son just patiently worked through his computer difficulties even today now he's probably getting closer to 43 years old 42 43 years old and he's still patiently solving his computer problems okay another thing now remember we're talking about culture shock and the culture shock that we are talking about is computers they were new to me well they were new back then too but the young people they enjoyed them played with them for my son computers were play for me computers were work big difference okay another thing about culture shock 文化冲击 at least for us reverse culture shock because now we come back to America and we have this 文化冲击 should be in China but now we're in America our restaurant eating changed dramatically okay our restaurant eating okay eating at restaurants in China we like to eat at restaurants right and it changed dramatically big change instead of eating lots of Chinese food when we came back to America we did not eat a lot of food we now 反而我们现在换成 eating Mexican food 墨西哥的食物 in fact even today even though I live in the world of Chinese I live in China and all of this my favorite food is still Mexican food if I can find it or if my wife will fix it for me okay so now we're changing to Mexican food going on of course there are lots of Chinese restaurants in every big town 大的城市都有很多 Chinese restaurants 中国or 中式的菜馆 big ones little ones a lot of them say golden dragon 金色的龙等等 I mean just many of these Chinese restaurants going on but we hardly ever went to them 几乎很难就去偶然去 maybe it was because we had experienced burnout on Chinese food what is burnout 是一种 it's not 文化冲击 it is Chinese food 冲击 and we had eaten Chinese food and so we were tired of Chinese food now somebody you may be interested in this somebody asked can you use chopstick 你能用筷子 of course I can use chopsticks I would have died a long time ago without chopsticks. So I do use chopsticks. Okay, but it was just the way in China you always eat Chinese food. So I was experiencing burnout with Chinese food going on. Another source of reverse culture shock, okay, was the inconvenience and inaccessibility and expense of America. Okay, so this reverse 相反的这个文化带来的冲击 was the inconvenience 不方便 Things were not as convenient as in China, in Taiwan. It just, how can I say? It's much more convenient in Taiwan and in China. And inaccessibility, that means it's hard to find the things. To accessible means 容易找到的. So inaccessibility means 好不容易找到的东西啊. Okay? And expense. Of course, 消费很高啊，东西很贵啊，等等。Okay? Going on. In Taiwan, if I wanted to build something, all I had to do was purchase the parts and then build it. Okay? 我只要买一些东西啊，然后就用它盖起来。I built it myself. I made it myself. Or I could have somebody make it for me. Going on. But in America, it seemed that almost everything is already made or assembled. 已经组成了，已经做好的所有的东西 assembled 组成 okay, and it's wait, everything is already done. So that's the reason why it's kind of expensive, because you can't do it by yourself. Going on. But after a few weeks, I discovered that the high cost of labor and it had forced many people to espouse the do-it-yourself ideology. Now, I need to explain this. Okay, well, where are we going to start? After a few weeks, I discovered that the high cost of labor, okay, 人家的这个工资薪水等等是好高 because it's so expensive, 是强迫人 what? To espouse. Woo! What does the word espouse mean? Very simply, to accept. A-C-C-E-P-T. 接受. So let's take a look at it in sentence. To espouse, to 接受 the do-it-yourself ideology or philosophy. 自己动手的做法. Do you know? Well, actually, nowadays people just call it DIY. DIY. First time I heard DIY, I said, what's that? Do it yourself. Do it yourself. 3 words, do it yourself. Okay. 自己动手. And this saved money, of course. Saved lots of money. Going on. Oh, yes. Car repair was also a big problem. Remember, we're talking about reverse culture shock. I discovered, well, this is not only true in America, it happens in China too, but somehow it caught me by surprise. not only was repairing a car expensive, 修理车好贵, but it seemed that honest mechanics seemed hard to locate. Honest, 诚实的修理人员啊, mechanics seemed hard to locate. Hard, 好不容易找到. Sometimes we use the word to locate to mean to find something. I located a wonderful restaurant yesterday. 我找到一个 very nice restaurant yesterday. So to find a honest 诚实 mechanic sometimes was a big problem. Well, there you have it. You have culture shock and you have reverse culture shock. I repeat again, when we went to China, we had culture shock. When we stayed in China for a long period of time, then we felt comfortable with China. And when we went back to America, we had reverse culture shock. I mean, one day I went out to a river. I went out to a river to swim with my family, and it was out in the woods, 在树林里面. And I went there, and the young people were not wearing clothes. 他们不穿游泳衣啊. I said, oh my, I can't. This doesn't happen everywhere, by the way, but it did then. I thought, oh, America, oh well. We do have an email address. Our email address is theoldprinciple@gmail.com, and we have a website. The website is www.theoldprinciple.org. Hey, it's been great to spend this time with you, and I hope that we will be able to meet again.